Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Blue Knight 7 of the Blue Knight Cast. Coming here today with episode 36, following up from yesterday's episode where I discussed the recent shakeups at Microsoft Xbox division. And I wanted to do this episode for a while. I was kind of wanting to talk about the state of Xbox for a bit, and I'm just kind of using this news as my catalyst for getting this one out. But I wanted to talk about what I would do if I was the CEO of Xbox in charge of riding the ship. Now that's kind of what Ms. Asha Sharma has been charged with doing. And I know there's a lot of concern and doubt. Like I said in the last episode, it's going to take a while before we know how good or bad a job she does or is doing. Because I'm expecting changes at a deep systemic level for Xbox division and how they run things. And they do need some changes because what they're doing is not right. I worry that they're not going to change the right things, though, or go in the right direction with their changes. That's the biggest thing on my mind. But I wanted to walk through some things that I feel like Xbox has done very wrong and what I would do to fix them. As most people know, most of Xbox's troubles have stemmed from the early 2010s, over 10 years ago, when they announced the Xbox One. It was kind of downhill, way downhill after that. They've tried to climb uphill over the Xbox One generation and then spent Xbox Series, the current generation, just shooting themselves in the foot over and over, I would argue. But just to give a brief history of Xbox, they come out back in, I believe it was 2000 or 2001, maybe. And they made a pretty big splash with Halo and kind of became known as the good shooter console because felt like every other game on that console was a first-person shooter at the time. And it did go over well, I would argue, with the more mature gaming audience. It was kind of they gained the second place in the console wars, I would argue, behind PlayStation with their PlayStation 2 at the expense of Nintendo, because while they had a system that basically rivaled Xbox for raw power, and in some games you could argue were only better on GameCube and needed GameCube tech to do things that they did, Resident Evil 4 being one of them. Xbox was able to grab a larger sales footprint and just generally outperform Nintendo with their GameCube, though they couldn't quite touch PlayStation 2. Why was that? I think part of it was the fact that Xbox and PlayStation 2 could play DVDs. Part of it was the fact that PlayStation had already grabbed the older gaming market from Nintendo. That the kids that were growing up as Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 were out, they kept, PlayStation 1 kind of won that fight. PlayStation 2 kept those people, but a few of them also bought Xboxes that generation too. Because of games like Halo. Now, Xbox 360, the successor, that generation, it had a head start on both PlayStation 3 and the Nintendo Wii. And you could argue Nintendo Wii won generation because it sold like 100 million units. But most people focused on the horse race between Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, where 360 came strong out of the gate. PlayStation 3 kind of shot itself in the foot a few times that generation. A very expensive console on release. Hard for third-party devs to develop for, so they went to Xbox instead. And PlayStation spent the back half of that generation trying to catch PlayStation 3 up to Xbox 360. And which set the scene for what should have been a pretty good fight on 8th gen between Xbox One and PlayStation 4. And Xbox One was kind of dead on arrival because they did some things that really hurt customer tastes at the time. And PlayStation 4 was more willing to market themselves as a more traditional console and business model. But big mistakes that were made with Xbox One was they focused on it as the entertainment center. It was trying to be like a Roku box as much as it was a console at the time. Keep in mind, smart TV stuff was still kind of young back then. So this was going to be the box you hooked to your TV that could stream Netflix, stream the YouTube, play the next Halo, do all that. But they made, in their initial press conference, they really emphasized, I'll call it the Roku box features, which that was dumb. People wanted a box that played video games that looked much better than what was on 360. That's what they wanted. Add to that the fact that on Raw Power, even though both 360 and PlayStation were actually using AMD Jaguar Core like CPUs, which made the architectures more PC-like than they had been before and allowed for easier porting between PC and the consoles. Xbox One was actually the weaker iteration of that CPU. So it was actually the weaker console of the two. Yeah. Then add to that the fact that, and I forget exactly how they were doing this, but Kinect was going to be like a required component of Xbox One now, and it would come with it. And they would have, it would raise all, this console was going to be always online. You suddenly had everybody worried about Big Brother. Yeah, they actually worried about that stuff back then. You kind of wonder if anybody cares now. Some still do. I know I do. But this went over very badly back then. It just did. And plus the fact that, you could buy a physical Xbox game, but you couldn't just give it to your friend for them to play. It is actually tied to your console by serial number, like once you installed it. All this was just not going over well at all, because this is not stuff you expected from a console experience. PlayStation 4 lets you share games by just handing the disc to your friend. It was a famous moment. They were showing off how you do game sharing. They just hand the disc to somebody else. I mean, it's stuff like that really hurt Xbox badly at the time. And I realize the sad parts of times now probably more closely reflect what Xbox One was shooting for. But it was pushing some stuff way ahead of its time. And it was doing some things that were, the game sharing was just anti-consumer. Let's get it out the door. doesn't change the fact that really what they wanted, both consoles wanted, was everybody downloading their games direct from PlayStation Store or Xbox, storing it onto hard drives, and skipping GameStop. I mean, you know, that's really what that generation was about, if you ask me, being able to just download games wholesale and invest in our ecosystem. I think, to me, that was a major part of that generation. The promise of 1080p that didn't quite get met, and just having your whole PlayStation 4, Xbox One library downloadable. I mean, that's, to me, was sort of the promise of that generation. And PlayStation 4 kicked Xbox pretty hard at the time. Towards the end, Phil Spencer, well, he took the ship part way through, and towards the end, he introduced things that led up to the Xbox Series. But his biggest contribution was Game Pass, the service where you're basically subscribing for access to download Xbox games, play them. You don't own them. Yes, you can still buy them. That was his big contribution. And you also saw the Xbox Series X, which put some GPU power on top of Xbox One to try to catch up more with PlayStation 4 Pro by that point. But all that went into Xbox Series generation with the 9th gen, with Xbox Series and PlayStation 5. Xbox was distant second. You could argue distant third, because Switch had pretty well overcome them at that point. Though I need to be consistent. To me, Switch was very much a competition, 9th gen coming early, competing against Series and PlayStation 5, which followed it. I do believe that. With Switch 2 being a 10th gen, but that should be compared to the eventual successors that haven't come yet. But all of that being said, Xbox Series never could get itself back to a rightful position. Phil Spencer also acquired a number of studios to improve their first-party output, which was needed. But we've spent this generation hearing about layoff after layoff. Yes, they acquired Activision. Yes, they fired or laid off a bunch of Activision people. Games got canceled. Perfect Dark showed very early on, canceled. The studio that was making Perfect Dark in conjunction with Crystal Dynamics closed. Other studios sold off. It was just, it's been kind of bad news after bad news. There was a first couple years where they really needed first party exclusives. Everything got delayed, or what did come out wasn't really good quality at all. And with exceptions. But it's just been a bad generation for Xbox Series. Their sales have been poor. I mentioned earlier that they had a terrible holiday last year. And it's basically been between PlayStation 5 and Switch, or Switch 2 now, depending on how you want to analyze it. And with that real long setup, I just wanted to say, if I had the reins of Xbox for a while, I know what I would do. I know what I would tell Asha Sharma to do. And it's probably the exact opposite of what she may be pressured to do. But here's what I would do. First thing I would do is begin a phase-out plan for Game Pass. And I would hit the internet immediately to say, yeah, this is what I'm doing, get ready. because Xbox has had two major problems, I would argue. The first is three major problems. The first is Game Pass. The second is making their ecosystem a little too open. The third is extremely inconsistent communication. I would work on communication day one. Here's what I'm doing, get ready. Even whether you like it or not, get ready. And I would phase out Game Pass to sell and try to get out two birds with one stone. Take care of Game Pass, take care of communication. We're getting rid of it. And my reason for that is simple. Yes, it brings in regular revenue for Xbox, but it cannibalizes their game sales. It's the sort of thing where, like, you paid for this Costco membership, you go around, you try stuff at the booth, but you didn't actually buy the thing as you walk out. They made a little money off of you for standing there trying games out. They didn't really make the money they needed to off of you, though, because you wasn't really buying stuff while you were there. That's what this is to me. People are paying, I'm not saying they're paying Game Pass costs money. I get that. I really get that. But it clearly hasn't been profitable enough. They clearly need a certain number of members willing to pay that to make it the kind of 30% profit margin we think Microsoft CEO wanted them to produce. But they never could hit that ceiling. The demand for this kind of service just never was going to hit that threshold. And it's pretty clear it just hasn't worked. They thought acquiring Activision and getting Call of Duty was really going to up the numbers, but it didn't do what they needed it to do. There's a point at which you say, yeah, this is a failure, let's cut our losses, let's phase out. And I think that's what they need to do. Now, I know I'd be bucked hard about that. But if I was working there wanting to do that. But because to them, they want services. Microsoft wants to sell services. If you look at state of Windows, don't even get me started on that. But it's very clear. They don't really want to sell products anymore. They want to make people subscribe to services and constantly pay them money. Power bill, water bill, Microsoft bill. That's clearly what they want. Yeah. But I would buck that so hard. I would, do everything I can to get back to a traditional model and say, all right, now and now go to my teams and say, all right, let's sell some games. That I think just doing that would help a lot. Would there be some Game Pass subscribers kind of miffed about it, feeling like they're going to spend some more money? Probably. But they could have bought these games all along and they didn't. So they should just go back to doing that. That'd be my answer. Next thing I would do is I would be grabbing Matt Booty by the collar and tell him he needs to work his booty and focus on getting games out at a more consistent pace. We're not here to lay off people, but we do need them to churn out the work. And, you might rub some developers the wrong way. But here's the thing. There's been a major problem this generation, last generation too, of games just taking too long to come out. Years and years. And I get the tech is cool, and I get that, there's this rendering individual strands of hair and bullcrap like that. I'm not saying studios can't make those games, but they need to work in more of them to have a shorter turnaround time, smaller projects, smaller budgets. Let's just flood the zone with some games, because not everybody wants those expensive AAA efforts. Some people just want a good AA game, or even a single A game, or even just some good indie games. I'd be working hard as I could to flood the zone with some lower budget stuff to make up for all these gaps in releases, because it's been a major problem. It killed them the first couple of years. It killed them. And PlayStation 5, they've done the same thing. They've hurt themselves in the same way. The only difference is they pursued live service games more and wasted resources on those, and they didn't even release. That's the difference. But they needed to get more games out in quantity to show, yeah, we got games. And that's what I'd be doing going forward. We're going to have games. Crank them out. If you need to lower the graphic settings to get this done, do it. Get it out. You could, there's room for the Hellblades. There needs to be some games like that. Don't get me wrong. The Forza, Hellblade, Halo should represent the best of Microsoft. But you need more things like what Double Fine seems to be doing with Kiln. I know that wasn't for everybody, but you need more of them to get people interested. Get this or that random person interested. You need more Kilns. I hate to say it. I would also, and generally speaking, I've already hinted to this a few times, I would focus on retaining talent. Take the Eastern models a little better, a little more. Because developer morale is down, and whoever it is, Sharma, whoever, is going to have to try to whip up their morale a little bit just to get some quality work out. It's that bad. I mean, it is. All the layoffs, things like that, being forced to use AI as much as they have. It's that bad. And this is the one thing where I would set my foot in the ground and say this is not the place for it. Though I'd probably get fired day one for saying it. They need to just keep the AI out of this division. I get its potential, but right now, I get there's some good uses for AI. I do. Now, this comes from someone who doesn't really believe in the AI they're pushing. But they need to keep the human element, retain human workers, not lay them off. This should probably be the most inefficient division in Microsoft for the simple reason these people are the ones making art. These games are an art form in the end. I have always been of that belief. And for that reason alone, you could argue Xbox is probably incompatible with the rest of the corporation. But it worked because they would just let the devs cook. And really, that's what I'm saying. Keep the AI out. Just let the devs cook. I'm pressuring them to get some lower budget titles out just for speed and just for quantity sake. But let them cook. The number one mistake that Phil Satya-Nadella, whoever you want to say, made the mistake in the recent era here is they acquired these studios, but they didn't really give them time to get their projects out. They started laying people off, and then games got canceled we've never heard about. There was one where I think Matt Booty was showing it to Phil Spencer, and he was playing it, and he wouldn't put the controller down. They had to tell him they had to go. But then that game was canceled. That's when you know you're not doing it right. I'm sorry. And so that's what I would do. I would try to do these things to improve developer morale, keep people, tell them they need to work faster, and get us some lower budget ones out. But keep them. Let them know they got a job. Simple stuff. Simple to me anyway. And we're not forcing you to do AI. We just want you to craft your art. That's how it should be. Should be. The other big thing I would do, and this would also probably give me heat from up top, but I would just say, look, we may have to honor contracts we made, and we hope they'll get some people interested in Xbox in the future, but from this day forward, any other games announced will be Xbox console exclusive. We're not leaving the PC people out in the cold because we never have, but we will keep our future announced games Xbox exclusive. If you like the ones that got sent out to PlayStation, etc., great. Buy an Xbox for the next one. That's what I would do. And that's, I'm not saying it's a great situation to be in, but to me it's like, how do you fix that? And I would probably also draw a line between, you see, to me, the games under Activision don't necessarily need to be exclusives. Call of Duty's already been promised to be multi-platform just because of legal stuff during the acquisition. I'm not saying Call of Duty need to become Xbox exclusive. I get that people on PlayStation will pay hand over fist for it because they have in the past. I'm not against Blizzard putting their games on Switch like Overwatch. I'm not against Crash Bandicoot continuing to be multi-platform, or Bethesda, id Software under Bethesda, making sure Doom is on all platforms. That stuff doesn't really bother me. Or even Skyrim find a way to get on another platform. That stuff does not what bothers me. What bothers me is when you see a core Microsoft Studios games like Halo, I guess Rare at this point with Killer Instinct, though it had history on Nintendo before it got there. My problem more is, there needs to be a core where, these are the Microsoft exclusive properties and they're staying on Xbox, and you better buy an Xbox if you want it on a console. Because by making their ecosystem so open, they took away the reason to buy one. Like, right now, for me, I have a PC, I have a Switch 2. Now, I was going to buy the PC games on Steam. We all know that. But Switch 2, Switch 1 even, I bought the games that could have been bought on Xbox, even though they didn't own them. Ori, I got that as a Christmas gift one year. I bought Cuphead. I didn't buy Pentiment or Grounded because I wasn't really interested in those. When they got the old rare Nintendo games, which I'm not really talking about them for this point of discussion, but it made me happy every time Rare game got on NSO. Battletoads, awesome. That made me jump up and down. Out of their current stable, obviously I would have loved to have seen the Killer Instinct Fighter go to Switch or Switch 2. Would still love to see that. I know I'm sounding like a hypocrite right now because I just said that should be part of the core, but if they released it, I'm going to buy it. But the point is, stuff like that should be what compels me to buy an Xbox. The one thing Xbox always kept, and I'm not saying they should give it to me just because I want it, but the one thing that always made me wish I had got like a Xbox One, and then thought about, is it worth getting an Xbox Series S or an X, was Rare Replay. But once they released about 90% of I want to say they probably got them all now on NSO, it's like, Okay, I'm not worried about it now. And, you know, that is my point. Like, there's still some games that would make me want to buy an Xbox, like the new Killer Instinct, though I have it on my PC. Like, that Perfect Dark game if it had come out. But obviously that's not coming, and if it did, you have to wonder if it'd be on PlayStation at this as well at this point, or on PC. So, but PC has always been a thing for Xbox. It's expected. I'm not trying to even cut out PC. My point is, why are you giving your best games to PlayStation? I know you're trying to make money on those games, but why are you giving some of your best games to PlayStation? That's my point. It's kind of like, you can put out for everybody, and then not everybody would want to be a part of that after a bit because you put out so much. I know I'm getting vulgar here, but it's true. Um, but those are the things I would do, and I'd probably generate a whole lot of heat from up front, and I'd probably just be in charge for about 5 hours. But that's kind of how I see it. Do I think Xbox is doing those things? No. I think you're going to see something where um, you'll see more and more AI injected into game development to try to speed it up. And it probably, I don't know if it really will. It probably won't. I do think that you're going to see Game Pass still be there and still touted, or maybe rebranded into some larger service where you rent an Xbox on the cloud. I think that could happen. All of that would be consistent with what the CEO of Microsoft wants, and I can't help but feel like that's what Asha Sharma is there to do. Like, actually get with the plan and put Xbox with the plan. And which is kind of ironic because everybody's talking that way about Sarah Bond, even though she was probably going in a more sensible direction. And even though I disagree with both of them, and Spencer, you get my point. But yeah, if I was CEO, I'd take the reins. I'd go back to a traditional business model. I'd do anything I can to whip up morale amongst developers. I would try to stress not hitting the high budget every time. Let's just crank some games out, even if they're smaller projects. And I would try to rein back in this exclusivity thing. Like, you can't go back on contracts already made, but I would try to make it to where, yeah, we're changing that going forward. You're going to have to buy an Xbox. I think if you did those things, game sales would go up. And you would probably, and here's the part that, here's why I think you'll never see these things happen, because I don't think the current corporate culture will allow it to happen. I think you would have to spend a whole generation, like this next Xbox generation, trying to win back goodwill. You can do all these things, but you can't expect it all to just get massive success just because you want it to. You would have to do this to earn back goodwill, watch those sales slowly climb back, and maybe not be where you want them to be by the end of that generation, to which you spend the next generation. I know I'm in the 2030s at this point, but the next generation actually trying to kick PlayStation's butt on a PlayStation 7. A Switch 4 or whatever Nintendo does at that point. That would be the goal. You play the long game, you win the long game, you expect to keep taking some hits for a minute because you've been in the corner getting the crap beat out of you by the competition. This has been a pleasant last couple of episodes, haven't it? Well, this is what I would do. Feel free to like, subscribe, share. Please comment below with what you would do if you were in charge. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to talk about something better in the future. I had one more idea concerning Microsoft, but I may save it because it's a little more off topic than the last two. But for now, I'm just going to say thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing it with me. Please come back again for the next episode. Thank you.